The video you're about to see is actually a compilation of several TikToks that I made about my favorite Pokemon of each type. I thought it would be a good idea to have them all in one place, so I decided to combine them all together for one big YouTube video. Enjoy. My favorite bug-type Pokemon is Ribombee. Now, Ribombee has a very similar story to Slazzle and Minior, except this Pokemon was actually obtainable really early on in the game. I knew that Cutiefly was a Pokemon that I intended to get when I saw it was revealed, but the more interesting part was when they revealed that it evolved into Ribombee, because I actually liked the evolution as much as I liked the base form. And trust me, there's a lot of Pokemon where I like the base form more than its evolution. So I was actually pretty happy that I could evolve this Pokemon and have it be on par with the other Pokemon that other trainers were using, and still have a Pokemon I liked. It was also available at Route 2, so like the very beginning of the game, and there was actually a quest where you meet up with this one woman in the Pokemon Center who's on her honeymoon, and she says that her husband, fell in love with a Cutiefly. Could you go catch one and show it to me so that I could catch one for him? And I'm like, okay, might as well. I was going to catch one anyway, so I caught one and showed it to her, and that became one of my 3 mainstays on my team. I may have rotated out once or twice, but even when I did, I always found myself bringing it back because I liked it so much. Towards the end, I didn't want to rotate it out at all. I really like Ribombee's design, how it's little and cute, but it's also very powerful, which I think is really cool because being small enables it to move really fast when fighting a much bigger opponent. I also love its signature move, Pollen Puff, and how you can use it to attack your enemies or heal your allies. And even though more Pokemon have gotten access to that move as well, which is really cool, I definitely kind of associate it with Ribombee. I'm also currently using it to play through the Teal Mask, and at the time I'm recording this, it is the highest level member of my team. So to put it simply, I love this Pokemon, both the base form and the evolved form, and I have a lot of history with it as well. When I did this in 2017, I actually really didn't have a favorite Dark-type Pokemon, so for the purposes of the video, I just went with Zoroark, because, well, they can be very useful for my favorite battle strategy, messing with your opponent. And I almost had the same problem here until I realized that Meowscarada is a Dark-type, and so I figured, you know what, might as well just go with that. But I also think Meowscarada is really cool. I mean, Flower Trick is amazing. A little overpowered, but sometimes you need OP. But there's really a lot more depth to this pick, and this is going to sound kind of crazy, but I need you to hear me out. So Scarlet and Violet come out, I pick my starter, and against all odds, I end up getting a female. Which, the gender ratio for that is so stupid, but that's another conversation for another time. Anyway, and here comes the weird part, I named her after somebody who blocked me on Twitter. Why did I do that? Well, the name fit and I didn't really have anything else. But also it's because that when they announced the Pokemon, I really felt that this person and I kind of bonded over talking about the starters. And I honestly felt like I was forming a connection with this person. And then there was the whole misunderstanding and they ended up blocking me, which really, really hurt. But I ended up learning a lot from the whole thing. I learned about conflict resolution and why nobody could ever do it. And I also learned that all feelings and all experiences are valid, because they're all a part of the truth. And that led me to finally learning my Saturn return lesson about 1.5 years after it left Capricorn. Case in point, my Meowscarada may have just helped me come to closure with the whole thing. And not only that, but it also represents a form of personal growth to me. And I guess that's why it's my favorite Dark type. Now that I say that out loud, it sounds really counterintuitive, but I'm going with it. My favorite Dragon-type Pokemon is Altaria. And this one actually has a very similar story to Gardevoir, because like Ralts, I first encountered it while playing XD, and it was love at first sight. But since it's acquired much later in the game, and I already had an established team or rotating team at that point, I never really got the chance to use it outside of purifying it, and I definitely would have purified it by hand. And while Altaria has become one of my Hoenn mainstays, this next part of the story gets really fuzzy and jumbled up in my head. Because I want to say Hoenn was the next step, but I don't remember even walking on Route 113 until 2013 in my 3rd playthrough. But also, I know I got a Swablu earlier than that in Pokemon Platinum, because it's the same Altaria I'm currently using in Soul Silver. I transferred it over in 2013 because I wanted to see the sprite walking behind me. But as you can see here, I caught this Pokemon in the spring of 2009, which means this is a Pokemon I caught while I was still in high school. It's really cool that I still have that, and I definitely am tempted to take it all the way up to Pokemon Home. But like I said before, I did get to use Swablu and Ruby, and even though I never finished that playthrough, I knew that I was definitely getting one when Omega Ruby came out. And when that happened, I randomly named it Cotton Fluff because of its cottony fluffy wings. Cotton Fluff went on to become one of my favorite Pokemon to use in that game, and it was even on the team that took me through my first Elite Four run and was part of the team that helped me beat my first Pokemon game. And FYI, I just want to point out that Gardevoir was also on that team too, and I just didn't get to mention it in the other video. Since then, every Altaria I've caught is named Cotton Fluff, and I actually have several. Most notably, I have one in Pokemon Sword that has the snow mark, which I find hilarious because it's Cotton Fluff the Snow Frolicker, which is 4 times weak to ice. And Cotton Fluff has definitely put in the work, especially in the Battle Tower where she's had several MVP moments. And after all that, it's no surprise that Altaria is definitely one of my top 5 favorite Pokemon. I catch it in every game I can, and now I'm looking into the possibility of taking her all the way up to Cynthia in Pokemon Platinum. My favorite electric type? Gonna have to go with Pikachu. And to explain why, well, I'll tell you a story. So picture this. It's the summer of 1999, and 8-year-old me and my mom are heading with my aunt and my 2 cousins to the Michigan Dunes. But of course, in order to get there, we have to stop by my cousin's house and pick them all up. And so we get there, and of course, we don't leave right away for whatever reason. My mom and my aunt were busy doing something. I didn't really care. But when I came in the house, my cousins were watching TV. And on the TV was this boy named Ash Ketchum. And he was trying to beat Brock with his Pikachu, and he couldn't do it. So, with the help of Brock's dad, that nobody knew was Brock's dad, he hooked up his Pikachu to, like, an electric charger thing, and then spent the entire night on a water wheel, stepping on a water wheel, to try to supercharge his Pikachu. And then the next day, he went back to the gym, did some Gen 1 soak shenanigans, almost won, but then was stopped by all of Brock's younger siblings, and then forfeited the match and walked away. But then Brock followed him, gave him the badge, and decided to go with him on his journey when his father showed up and revealed that he was his father, and decided to actually partake in his responsibilities as a parent. So Ash, Brock, and Misty, they went on their way, and we went on our way to the Michigan Dunes. And that was my introduction to Pokemon. For the longest time, Pikachu was my favorite Pokemon, since it always held a special place in my heart because of that memory. Now I don't want it to be my favorite Pokemon anymore because I want it to be something more unique, but I can settle for it as my favorite electric type. My favorite fairy type is Swirlix. Now, you're probably sitting there thinking, Joan, out of all the cool fairy types that there are out there, why would you pick the one that's just simply cotton candy? And the answer to that is, that's what I like about it. I like how they made a Pokemon that was cotton candy. Swirlix is adorable. Like, I mean, look at this face. How can you not love this? It's a simple design that also hides some intricacies, because sometimes it just floats around like a little floating piece of cotton candy. And then after a bit, you'll actually see that it has feet, and it will stick its feet out and land on the ground. It's just so adorable. Its evolved form, not so much. And just like some of the others that I've talked about, Swirlix is another one of those Pokemon where I loved it as soon as I saw it. And it was really kind of like my first real introduction to the fairy type, aside from Pokemon that had their types changed. And I've actually used Swirlix quite a bit. I used it to play through Pokemon X, where it stayed as a main member of my team. And I also had one in Pokemon Sword because, well, let's be honest, there weren't that many Gen 8 Pokemon that were introduced that I was extremely fond of. And when I saw Swirlix appear in that game, I was so happy, and I caught it, and I ended up keeping it on my team. So I used Swirlix to beat 2 Pokemon games, and I'm really fond of it, and that's how it became my favorite fairy type. When it comes to my favorite fighting type, I have to pick Flamigo. Now, fighting is one of those types that doesn't have a lot of Pokemon I like, so the choices were few and far between. But as soon as I saw a Flamingo Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, I knew I was going to make a spot for it on my team. My Flamigo Dawn, yes, that is a reference to Empire's SMP, was with me throughout the entire playthrough, and I really think it's kind of cool to have a fighting type that isn't, well, ugly. Now, I realize I probably ruffled a lot of feathers with that, no pun intended. But the fighting type has always had a lot of, like, masculine-looking buff Pokemon, and that's never really been my key aesthetic. And I do realize that Yanxiao doesn't, Lucario doesn't, and Phalanx definitely doesn't. But none of those Pokemon have really stood out to me. So when I found a fighting-type Pokemon that I liked the look of, well, it automatically got the top spot. My favorite fire-type Pokemon is Slazzle. Now, this was a Pokemon I wasn't really drawn to initially. Granted, I may have taken a peek at the leak like once. I think I remember doing that at some point, but I didn't really dwell on it, and I didn't really find it interesting, and then everybody else started talking about how they couldn't find female Salandits, and I just didn't really have any reason to use one. But I started gaining affection for it when I was fighting the totem one. Like, hey, this looks pretty cool, I kind of want to use one now. Which, by the way, that photobombing Slazzle at the end of the fire trial is the most hilarious thing I've ever seen in a Pokemon game. Like, I don't think I've ever laughed that hard at 9:30 in the morning. So I decided to accept the challenge and find a female Salandit. And even though I didn't get it on my first round through of searching, I did on my second encounter after taking a break. I caught her and named her Gina, thus starting the trend of me naming Pokemon after secret babies in books I've read when I don't have anything else to name them. Don't ask. But Gina quickly became one of my 3 mainstays in Pokemon Sun, and I ended up developing an affinity for this Pokemon because of it. And here's a fun fact for you all. Slazzle is actually Lilith's favorite Pokemon. At least, my version of her. Those of you who have played The Sims 2 know who I'm talking about. All of those are reasons why Slazzle is very near and dear to my heart and one of my favorite Pokemon. My favorite flying-type Pokemon is Emolga. Emolga is a Pokemon that I liked from the very beginning, right when I first saw it. It is absolutely adorable and has such a great design. I think it's really unique that it's a flying type, but it's not a bird, and it doesn't even have wings. It's a flying squirrel, and it glides instead of flies. The other thing I like about Emolga is that, while it's a Pikachu clone, and I don't really even like that terminology that much, it doesn't feel like a Pikachu clone. It feels like it's its own Pokemon. And maybe that's because of the way that, Unova was set up, how they kind of wanted to start from square one again and make things maybe a little bit different. But Emolga is definitely the vibe of its own unique Pokemon, especially with its behavior where it, hides in the holes of trees that were drilled by Pikipek. And they tend to, just like real squirrels, stuff all the food in their cheeks, even to the point where they can't even fly very well. I really love that Iris got one in the anime. Anytime any character has one of my favorite Pokemon, it makes me really happy. I also used an Emolga. Well, to be honest, I probably did every time I tried to play through White. But in my 3rd playthrough, the one that I actually finished, I used one there. And so it was really fun to actually be able to play through the game with one of my favorite Pokemon. But yeah, I like Emolga. I've liked it ever since I saw it. I've used one, and Iris's Emolga is cute and is actually kind of funny in the way it just causes trouble at some points. My favorite ghost type is Poltegeist. Now, Ghost is one of those typings where there really isn't a lot of Pokemon I'm, overly fond of. There are a couple, like Mischievous, but there are also a couple I find kind of triggering. Poltegeist is cool because it's tea. I mean, I don't really like tea that much. It isn't something I really enjoy drinking, but a tea Pokemon in a teapot is a really cool concept. How can you not like this? I mean, look at that. I love these details in, Scarlet and Violet. And I really like how Poltegeist just kind of moves around in the teapot. You never really know where its head's gonna be. And that gives a lot of personality to the Pokemon. I did play through Sword and Shield with a Poltegeist. It was a main member of my team. And I also like the diversity of its move pool. I mean, it's not extremely diverse, but this thing gets Psychic and Giga Drain. Yes, please. Poltegeist is a really fun Pokemon, especially for Ghost type, and it's just really, lighthearted instead of, kind of sad, and that's why I like it. Also, this is cool. My favorite Grass-type Pokemon is Gossifleur. And this is another one where there's no really specific rhyme or reason for it. It's just, I like the way the Pokemon looks. In fact, it was really, the only Pokemon in Generation 8 that I saw, and at first sight, I knew it was going to be one I would use. And I did use it. I did use it through Sword and Shield, and I actually, I did evolve it because I had, a Swirlix and a Carkol. I had enough unevolved Pokemon on my team. And even though Gossifleur is one of those Pokemon where I definitely like its pre-evolved form better, it's not that I don't like Eldegoss. I just like Gossifleur better. It just appeals to me more for some reason. I think maybe it's more, colorful or something. But that's pretty much it. I don't really have an exciting story to tell about this one. And that's probably why I've been putting off making this video for a while. My favorite ground-type Pokemon is Garchomp. Now, I know what you're thinking, and no, it is not because of Cynthia's Garchomp. Mostly. It's just that ground is another one of those typings that doesn't have a lot of Pokemon I have a big affinity for. So my choices were pretty much between Gastrodon and Garchomp, and well, yeah. But I would be lying if I said that Cynthia's Garchomp didn't have any influence on this pick at all. It's just that it was the spark and not the fuel. So back in 2017, Once I knew I had the ability to beat a Pokemon game, I decided that when the eventual Diamond and Pearl remakes would come out, I would get a Gible, name it Cynthia, and then the final matchup of the final battle would be Cynthia's Garchomp versus Cynthia the Garchomp. However, I had never trained up a Garchomp before, and after I made that decision, I decided I really wanted to. So I went in Pokemon Sun, caught a Gible, and trained it up. And here's what's significant about that. I hate grinding. It's something that if I have to do too much of it, I just can't stand. And that was a big factor as to why I didn't beat a Pokemon game until I was 26. I found myself grinding so much that I just lost interest in playing the game. But I enjoyed training up that Garchomp. That Garchomp was the first Pokemon that I actually enjoyed leveling up. And I think that's because I was doing it on my own volition instead of something I had to do to progress in the game. And as I trained up that Garchomp, I grew to have an affinity for it. So much so that Garchomp became one of my favorites. And for those of you that are wondering, yes, I did do the Garchomp versus Garchomp thing, and she won me the battle. Yes! Come on! Yes! Yes! My favorite Ice-type Pokemon is Spheal. Similar to Altaria and Gardevoir, I first encountered a Spheal as a Shadow Pokemon in XD Gale of Darkness. And again, as soon as I saw it, I knew I had to make it a part of my team. So I snagged it from one of the funniest characters in the game because they can't figure out how to count. Spheal was an early game encounter, so I kept it with me and purified it by hand, and after that I had grown attached to it, so I kept it around on my team. I love its design and how it's such a happy Pokemon, and I absolutely love how, especially in XD Gale of Darkness, it rolls back whenever it gets hit. I also loved using Aurora Beam, and the animation in XD is probably one of my favorite attacking animations. In fact, I kinda missed its Spheal form after it evolved. So when I caught one in Omega Ruby, I decided to keep it as Spheal and super train it defensively instead. I ended up taking it to the league, and it was one of the Pokemon that helped me beat my first main series Pokemon game. And because of all that history that I have with Spheal, I ended up using one in Legends Arceus as well. And so, like a lot of the others on this list, Spheal has a very near and dear place in my heart. My favorite normal type is this guy right here, Porygon 2. And as for why, well, here's a fun fact about me you may or may not know. I have a computer science degree. Now you're probably wondering why I'm doing this full time instead of programming computers. And that's because computer programming, specifically debugging, makes me want to tear my hair out. And that's mostly because when you solve one problem, 5 more pop up out of nowhere, and before long it's been 5 hours and you've made absolutely no progress. Yeah, there's no way I'm doing that 40 hours a week. By the time I realized that, however, I was just one class away from getting my degree, and so I'm like, okay, fine, I'll just suck it up and get it. And I truly don't regret going to college. I loved the experience, and there have been times when I really wished I could go back. But having a Porygon 2 by my side would have made things a whole heck of a lot easier. I mean, it could literally just convert into computer code, go inside my program, and tell me everything that's wrong. And then I wouldn't have to spend countless hours getting nothing accomplished. Of course, that might also mean that I would have spent less time in school and more time being miserable, but you know what? We're not going to think about that. Plus, I find the Porygon line intriguing and really wish they gave us more information and a storyline for it so we're not just completely grasping at straws. Like, the Pokédex entries literally don't do enough. As for why Porygon 2 and not Porygon Z, well, for starters, I've never actually used one. But also, in order to get it, you have to infect your Pokemon with a virus. I mean, that just doesn't sit right with me. I mean, who in their right mind would do that? Okay, maybe it's not as big of a deal as I thought. My favorite poison type is Glimmora. Now, Glimmora on its own is a really cool looking Pokemon. It's kind of unique. There's not a lot of Pokemon like it. In fact, there's no Pokemon like it. And so I really like that uniqueness to it and its color scheme. And oh my goodness, it's shiny. My favorite shiny has always been Horsey, but this one is giving it a run for its money. I love Glimmora's ability, which is Toxic Debris. So basically, as soon as you hit it, a bunch of toxic spikes get spread out all over the field. So it's you can just completely set up to screw over your opponents right away. Now for me personally, Glimmora was the final member of my team in Pokemon Scarlet. And there actually is kind of a crazy story about how this happened. So by the time I was, fairly far into the game, I had a 5-member team ready to go. And I was just looking for something to fill that 6th slot. And I tried a lot of different things. I tried an Earthworm, that didn't really feel right. I tried to Titan, and I wasn't really feeling that either. And then I came across a Glimmet in a cave. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but I think I did see the toxic debris thing, and I'm like, okay, this is the one. I just knew that it was going to be the final member of my team when I hit it and the toxic spikes came out. At least I think that's what happened. But I caught one, put it on my team, I raised it, evolved it, and Starburst fit perfectly. It came at the right place at the right time, and it's such a unique Pokemon, and I love its color scheme and its ability too, and so it's like, I can't help but not like this Pokemon. My favorite Psychic type is Gardevoir, and honestly, I could put the whole evolutionary line here, because with the exception of Gallade, I truly love every single Pokemon in it. I guess this is the Pokemon that kinda symbolizes my return to playing the game after several years, because once I started playing XD and I looked at the strategy guide and saw that there was a Ralts to snag, I knew I had to have it. And once I did, it did not let me down in the slightest. I was very pleasantly surprised that I liked the way it looked even after each evolution, and Psychic definitely put in the work. With the exception of swapping it out for Lunatone a couple of times, Gardevoir stayed on my team through the very end. And during my first playthrough of Sapphire, when I saw Wally catch his Ralts, I immediately went back to grab one, and since then there's only been one Hoenn playthrough where Gardevoir wasn't on my team. My history with this Pokemon, along with just loving the way it looks, is a reason why Gardevoir is definitely one of my top 5. My favorite Rock-type Pokemon is Minior, and boy do I have a story for this one. But I guess we can start with the fact that Minior is one of those Pokemon that I loved as soon as I saw it. Like, the minute they revealed it on the trailer, I knew that I was using one of these. One of the things I really like about this Pokemon is how it has such a unique mechanic. With the whole, it's got the outer shell and it's pretty defensive, and then once its HP, drops to half, it busts out of the shell and becomes primarily offensive. So you can really just change up your strategy just like that and leave your opponent going, what? Which, of course, is my favorite thing to do in Pokemon battles. And I really love the design of the core and how there's, several different colors, and I just saw that, and I do. I knew that this was going to be one of my Pokemon. Getting it, however, was much easier said than done. Completely ignoring the fact that I had to just go through half the game without it, when I finally got to Mount Hokulani, this thing gave me a bunch of issues. And part of that, I guess, is my fault, because I really only wanted specific colors. I only wanted, the pink, which is, well, they call it red, but that's fair enough, because pink is, a tint of red. And so I really wanted the pink or the blue. So I couldn't just throw a quick ball, I had to weaken it down to see what the color of the core was. And that was the first problem, because it immediately hit me with a self-destruct before I could do that. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. So I had to go back to the Pokemon Center and grab a Poliwag that had damp out of my PC box and put it in the front of my party so it couldn't blow itself up. And so after that, I tried 3 more, and I didn't get the color I wanted. I kept getting green and orange, or maybe it was yellow, but it was some combination of that. And after 3 of those, I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I want to continue on with the story now. Next one I see, I'm just going to chuck a quick ball at it, and whatever color it is, it is. So I did just that, and I got Violet, which I didn't even know was an option. But I liked it, so I took it. And this Minior became one of the 3 mainstays on my team. I really enjoyed using it, I felt like I got really close to it, and it's able to have a very diverse moveset. It can learn Psychic, which is another big plus. So as requested, the next type I'll do is Steel, and my favorite Steel-type Pokemon is Klefki. Now this one doesn't really have a backstory. No special memory about it having a place on my team, no sob story about somebody that screwed me over. No, I just like it because I like how it's a Pokemon based off of a keyring. And I know, there's 50,000 people out there that think that that was a stupid idea, and that there's nothing special about it, and blah blah blah, and you're 100% allowed to have that opinion, because you know what? I'm not going to be that asshole who hates on you for disliking a Pokemon I like. But I will tell you some of the reasons that I happen to like it. Number 1, the idea of it actually holding keys. Oh my god, that is a game changer. Literally, I could just have a Klefki, give it my house keys, and then I'll never lose my keys again. If I'm ever locked out of my house, I just pull out my Klefki and problem solved. And second thing is, even though I haven't been able to use it all that much, I have gotten the chance to use it in the Sword and Shield Battle Tower. And the thing that makes Klefki really valuable to me is that it has Prankster. So I can put up at least 1 screen before my opponent attacks. Trust me, that saved my butt on multiple occasions. But other than that, I think Klefki's really neat and a really cool Pokemon, and I don't care what all the haters say. My favorite water-type Pokemon is Finizen. Why not Palafin, you may ask? Well, the answer is simple. I've never gotten a chance to evolve it. This is what happens when you don't have friends. Anyway, that's not the point. Finizen was a pleasant surprise, considering I, along with many other people, did think they would actually make a dolphin Pokemon. So when I came across Finizen for the first time, it wasn't just a surprise, but I felt attached to it right away. It's one of those Pokemon that I loved immediately from the moment I first looked at it. I knew right away that it was going to be a member of my team. The design is simplicity at its best. Yes, it's simple. Yes, they could have done more, but they didn't really need to. It makes it obvious that this is a Pokemon without diverting too much from the animal inspiration. And I love how it moves around and flips like actual dolphins. It loses points since it requires social privilege to be able to evolve it, which I don't have. But the design was so good that when I saw that Palafin, or at least the base form of Palafin, looks exactly like Finizen, I was kind of relieved, since I was kind of concerned that it would become like uglier when it evolved, because there are quite a few Pokemon where I like the base forms but not the evolved forms. And here's a fun story for you. I named my Finizen Catalina. I got the name from a character from Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure, so it wasn't really that I named it after her. I liked the name and I used it. But the interesting thing about Catalina is that she would turn into a beast. And I ended up giving that name to a Pokemon that evolves into Palafin. You know, the Pokemon that goes through a heroic transformation when it's recalled and then brought back into battle. Totally didn't plan that. When I picked the name, I didn't even know Palafin could do that. But hey, it works!